Back in 2011, I started a project of shows here for the MIC in Faenza. My name is Irene Biolchini, and I started to follow a program in which every year I was inviting a contemporary living artist to do a special project for the museum. The big challenge for the artist invited was to deal with our historic collection, creating site-specific installation. When I invited Loredana Longo to make an exhibition here at the Museum of Ceramics, she decided, before presenting a project, to come here and visit the museum. When we entered this particular area of the museum, she decided that she had to make a special project for this area. You have to know that the museum was bombed during the Second World War. And in this case, we keep the memory of some objects that were reassembled after the bombing, and they clearly show some cracks, but even they also show how the glaze helped different pieces in glue together. When Loredana Longo saw this case, she felt an incredible strong connection with her way of working. You have to know that Loredana Longo made a series of videos in which she was creating a beautiful setup of a bourgeois interior, like a dining room or living room or beautiful bedroom, and then she used to make them completely explode. After the explosion, she used to glue together all the pieces that exploded a few minutes before. And the final setup of her exhibition was usually to create again the dining room, and in the middle of the dining room to put the video that was going on loop of the explosion of what you had in front of your eyes. This particular approach, therefore, was very close to these objects. She felt that the plates and the glasses that were on the table kept the same cracks that were very visible in here, and that she had to bring the memory of her own private explosion in a public space that experienced an explosion itself. So the project that Loredana brought here was the project of explosion, but somehow it was specifically tailor-made for this space and for its own history. In this room, we decided to set up the installation made by Loredana Longo. It was quite a hard job. We had to remove the two cases that you see on my back, and we created a huge wall with wallpaper in order to have the final effect of a bourgeois interior. And in the middle of the room there was the big table with all the plates and the very precious materials and glasses and food and so on and so forth. The idea was that the spectator was entering into a scene, into a crime scene, and he had to discover what really happened. To shock him, of course, in front of him, here on the wall, there was the video going on loop and showing the explosion of the setup he was seeing. It was, of course, something of a very strong effect. The sound of the bomb was echoing all around the very same corridor that exploded due to a bombing during the Second World War. The sensation of being completely immersed into something potentially violent was what the artist was looking for. The spectators, therefore, were wandering around the precious ceramics and plates of the very ancient history of Faenza, and then were all of a sudden entering this contemporary and Baroque at the very same time scene. Our final goal was to engage two different kinds of public into a unique work of art. Of course, the public used to contemporary art was feeling very comfortable in confronting such an installation, but at the very same time had the possibility to discover the precious collection of the museum. On the other side, the public that was very used to ceramic and was coming to the museum to see our ancient collection was confronting the world of contemporary art. The final purpose was to give to both of them a new experience, a new possibility of encounter, something strange, more probably, but also something very challenging, questioning what is true, what is false, what is a setup, what really exploded, and what was fiction. We are at the storage of the museum, one of the very heart of this important institution. Here are conserved and kept all the pieces that exploded during the bombing of the Second World War. Till that time, the restorers are working, putting back together what was destroyed at that time. When Loredana Longo came at the museum, she visited with me this particular section, and she was extremely fascinated by these pieces. As you can see, all of them kept their own inner beauty, and in some cases, the final result of some black smoked effects is even more beautiful than the piece as it was. Loredana Longo felt that these pieces were perfectly reflecting the kind of poetics she was looking for while working at the Explosion series. Even the plates that exploded in her performances when she was recording the video, in fact, had small black parts. The cracks were very visible when she used to put them together. And so the power, the strength that these objects kept was really speaking to her. By looking at them, the artist realized that she was already working with the ceramic, even if she never thought about it. And therefore, slowly, she started to develop a new approach towards the material. She understood that ceramic could encapsulate immediately the power and the strength of fire and of action due to its malleability. So she started working with ceramic a few years ago, keeping in mind the power of the fire and the power of the action and of the explosion. What is very interesting for us is that due to the visit to the museum, even her own aesthetic, even her own artistic process somehow changed. When she arrived here, she never used ceramics in a conventional way. She never worked with clay, she never baked it, she never used a kiln. But at the very same time, she understood the power of these daily objects, what they meant for the people who used to live with them, and she decided to keep the power of these domestic strength, and at the same time, the strength of the bomb. What is also very interesting is that Loredana, but many other artists who visited the deposit, kept finding in these pieces new meanings, new sources of inspiration, even new approaches. And at the very same time, the personnel of the museum started to look at these fragments in a new creative way, somehow. So what they did in their artistic vision changed the daily vision that the staff of the museum had of the pieces itself. What is also interesting is that at the very same time, what the museum staff explained to the artists gave them new instruments to rethink their own work. What happened with Loredana Longo, I mean her decision to work with ceramic after making an exhibition here, happened also in many other occasions with many other artists that visited the museum. This attitude is something typical of contemporary art. Many of the artists now working with ceramic, in fact, started with very different materials. One above all, Salvatore Arancio, who was invited here at the museum for the special edition of the Faenza Prize. He studied photography and then he decided to move towards clay. And now clay is and ceramics are two very important elements of his research. Therefore, even if you as an artist never thought about ceramics, you never know what ceramics can give you. And on the other side, if you always thought about ceramic as something entering the daily life, the daily object, the popular element, you can always discover some new potential in it. The fact that so many artists were so interested in the deposit, in the storage of the museum, made us understanding that maybe what we weren't considering as a collection yet, but as a series of pieces that were glued together in order to go back to the state of a collection, was probably our misconception. The interest that artists had toward this object also led them to create new artworks, new approaches, new visions in a very creative way. And their way of looking at these objects helped me as a curator in questioning even what I consider as object, what I consider as art, what I consider as furniture, because most of the time, just by changing your approach or your way of looking, you can discover new possibilities. That was the case, for example, of many objects that we had in the museum, and many of the artists that came here helped me in understanding their value, but helped also the restorer that were working with these pieces to find again the mystery behind them. It's like when you, as a curator, enter in the studio of an artist for a studio visit and the artist starts telling you, I'm not sure about this artwork, I'm not sure about this particular aspect, and just by talking with you, he starts to reimagine some works. So the power that you have as a curator is to enter and understand where the artist is going, most of the time helping him also in understanding his research due his process. At the very same time, the artist can help the curator in understanding the value of some objects, but also in understanding the importance of enlarging your vision and your perspective. If this dialogue between you as a curator and the artist works, most of the time the final result is a new space, something hybrid, something complex that can also challenge the spectator to new approaches and new ways. So, in my personal experience, the best advice that I can give to you is to challenge yourself, to go outside your comfort zone and to create a dialogue the most as possible with the other part.